And this Japanese team, when they wanted to climb it, they just saw this massive rock face and said, we're going to climb that, and they put bolts in. But no one was ever able to find the route afterwards. And I was climbing with this Australian climber who was much better than me, and we were like, oh, we'll just go up and we'll try it out. And we started climbing, and the climbing got so much more difficult than my skill level that I just started getting more and more scared, and it just ended up being this vertical face. We were trying to climb with like alpine climbing gear, not rock climbing gear at all. And I remember being so scared as I went up. I got to this point that my hands were just totally bleeding because they were just totally screwed from holding onto the rock. And I got so scared that I had to make this deal to myself. I was so scared that I said, if I got any more scared, I'd just give up and let go and just fall off. And that was the only way I could get myself to keep going, was by bargaining and saying, well, I'll deal with this, but if it gets any worse, I'll just give up. And I've never been so glad to be back on the ground when we finally got off it.
Wow, you guys have some good experiences. Most of those experiences, I imagine you don't want to relive, particularly your freaky lady at the window. So why do we do it to ourselves? Why do we watch scary films like It, the one on there? That messed me up as a kid. Don't watch that film. But why do we do it? Why do we not only watch the films, but we take it a step further and we actively participate in these scary experiences in games? Why, Maciej, why do you think we do this to ourselves?
Well, you see, I don't think we really like to be afraid. Not really. When we're really afraid, then we like to get into safety. But if we can get ourselves into situations that are kind of scary, but we're still in safety, relative safety, then we like to exercise ourselves. You know, it gets our adrenaline pumping. We're probably adrenaline junkies. I know I am. I get myself constantly into trouble. So yeah, I think
doing what? Doing what? What do you get yourself into trouble doing?
Well, for example, I used to climb too, and I had this really crazy guy who would come to me and say, "Hey, have you ever been to Paris?" I'm like, "No." "Would you like to be?" I'm like, "Yeah, one day, sure." And then he was like, "How about Friday?" So one day he came and said, "Hey, have you ever been to Alps? The German mountains?" I'm like, "No." "How about Friday?" So we went to mountains, and we were supposed to climb this peak called Alpenspitze. It's about 2,600 meters, so it's not really high. But we thought that you don't really have to climb it; you can hike. And at some point, I ended up standing.
Dean's laughing over. I think
he
knows what
I ended up
next.
standing on the wall like this. And there's no way I can reach the next one. And I really stretched to get here. So I'm like, okay, this is it. I'm going to die. And hopefully I wasn't alone. There were two friends with me, standing next to me like this. And I said, dudes, I'm stuck.
I want to go home.
And I already started to feel that my legs are shaking. And you have all those thoughts going through your head like, okay, if I slip, I'm going to die. If I stay here, I'm going to die. If I pull this rock and it's loose, I'm going to die. Shit. So, but hopefully my friends started talking to me, and it kind of got me relaxed. And then I was okay, there's only one way out of here, and that means move. So I grabbed the rock, and then I counted to 3, like 1, 2, 3, and then I moved, and then again and again. I had so much adrenaline that I didn't think. I just moved, and suddenly, as I pull myself up, there's like a memoir table put onto a mountain for 4 people that died at this very place.
Okie dokie.
And I could already see my name at being the 5th one. So we went up, and yeah, getting down was really awesome.
Al, what do you, presumably when you shot out of bed, when the ground was shaking, when Mother Earth was about to swallow you, the characteristic of being very scared is that adrenaline rush. That's one thing, and you know, we all got it standing here facing you guys. There's the adrenaline comes in and it makes you a bit shaky. It's the fight or flight thing, I guess.
Yeah.
But what are the other characteristics of people who are scared?
But I think, you know, I think it's the kind of dynamics of the roller coaster. You know, you can look at a terrifying roller coaster or fairground ride and think, no, I don't really want to go on that. But you kind of force yourself to go on it, and you know, it's thrilling, and you have the kind of satisfaction of actually achieving something that you thought was going to be terrifying. You have the adrenaline rush afterwards, and you know, from my experience, is usually your sort of first reaction to a scary roller coaster is, let's do that again, because you know, I think you kind of start to get the buzz from it. So I think it's a really interesting kind of balance of kind of it's almost testing yourselves. You know, can you make it through? Can you actually do this?
And you get a bit smelly afterwards because of the adrenaline sweat.
Yeah,
as well.
that's a big part of it.
Yeah, that's the bonus. Will, which games over the years do you think have recreated this experience of fear? Which games have perhaps shaped your memory of fear in games?
I think that people of my generation were at this perfect kind of point of the technology was just good enough to really fit in with our imaginations, and so something like the original Doom was, we could be so embroiled in it, and just the simple thing of opening a door in Doom just was terrifying, and just hearing the growl of the Pinky Demon and stuff like that. So I think, you know, like games like that, but also just games like Alien Isolation, where you're being hunted. I think it really taps into something quite primeval in us. We're all essentially animals with flight or fight instincts, and I think just any game that can recreate at the safe arena the feeling of being chased, you know, that nightmare I'm sure we've all had of being chased by some unknown force behind us.
And you can't run fast enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the covers are on your legs. And you
But yeah, I think that's what games do. They can create this world in which we can, you know, relive our nightmares, which doesn't sound good, but like, you know, it can be really, you know, cathartic experiences.
Which games have made you relive your nightmares, Dean? Apart from making DayZ, presumably.
Yeah, well, I think Will brought up a really good point. I just think there's something so tacit and real about being scared. And I think that's why, for me, like, the original AVP, Alien vs. Predator, a long time ago when I was at university, I played a lot of that. And I played a lot of it survival multiplayer, I think I was telling you last night. And you'd play it and you'd have to sign in. It was like MSN Gaming Zone or something. And you'd just play, I'd play the game with like a random person or something, and there'd be wave after wave and wave of aliens come in. There was this survival mode, and it wasn't like the remake of it where the aliens got worse and worse. They would just stay the same. And so I'd end up playing it for like 5 hours or something, and the tension, I'd be shaking by the end of it. And I think I was telling you, it was my first sort of experience with permadeath as well, because even though it wasn't intended, when your other player you're playing it with died, you lost all chance to contact them. So I'd been playing with this guy for like 5 hours or something, and then suddenly he died, and then I realised there was no way for me to ever contact him again. So it was actually like he'd actually died to me. So yeah, and just that tension there's something so real about it.
Have fear and horror games, I mean, there's lots of different types, but how have they changed over the years? Where were they? Where are they now? There seems to be a lot of different types of games now. What's the Al? What, I guess, leading a big project yourself now. How have they changed?
I think, well, from my perspective, I think, you know, we had the kind of old school survival horror, kind of Japanese survival horror, original Resident Evil, and the kind of Silent Hill, and the kind of, you know, you're walking around with a plank of wood with a nail in it, and
in the game.
Yeah. No. And I think that's totally cool. But I think things have evolved. I think, as Will said, you know, I think the capabilities of the technology amount allows us to create really, really immersive worlds, which just really heighten the sense of fear. And I think the interesting thing is, I think kind of scary games, horror games have kind of broken out of that mold of just being this kind of really specific survival horror model, and I think you can find some really compelling survival horror-like experiences in a whole range of really, really compelling experiences in a range of games, whether it's DayZ or Project Zomboid or Dying Light, through to indie titles, where I know Limbo, or there's some really great horror experiences out there, and they don't have to stick to this kind of rigid archetype that was kind of laid down a long time ago.
Right, and it almost feels like a disservice giving them a kind of fear and horror label because it's so broad, and they do other things. So shortly before this, very shortly before, I told the panelists here that I'd be giving them a stimulus, which was a typical fantasy knight rescuing a princess, because that's the sort of Disney thing. So let's mess it up a bit. Let's make it scary. Hopefully there are some kids watching this who won't be able to sleep for years. So, Will, I'll jump into you first, because I want you to get comfortable being third in line there. So what would you do to make that idea interesting and maybe suspenseful?
Okay, well, the tagline to this is, "You'll wish she was in another castle." And basically, you're going through the castle, and it's all kind of like, a little bit spooky, telling a bit of a story, but it's quite easy as well. And then you get to the princess, and then she actually becomes a terrifying monster, and she then chases you back down through the systemically created castle. Do you know what? It's a bit like Alien Isolation. You're hiding in cupboards. She's dragging you out, wearing the little dimple on her head and stuff like that.
And so, what techniques kind of specific to the way you approach horror games or fearful games, what techniques would you use? You mentioned systemically designed or like procedurally generated, I guess, levels that you'd be running through to kind of add a sense of game to it. What other techniques would you use to kind of...
Well, I think that something that you'd probably look at is... I think overall horror games have been kind of mistreated over the years, and I think there's this massive audience for them that has kind of been ignored. And but the thing that really made me realise the power of them was when the Slenderman game came out, and I was just hearing all these kids talking about it on the bus and or stuff like that. And I think that's the sort of thing that you'd use. You just turn around, you see the princess standing in the corner, staring at you, and you wouldn't know whether to run or hide. That amazing kind of weeping angel kind of approach.
That could be the woman at the window.
Exactly like the woman at the window. Maybe she's here now.
I gotta go.
Yeah, Matt check. Seeing as it kind of involves you now, what would you do? What treatment would you give that Disney fairy tale? What would you do to it?
I would really love to do something that many years ago the original Fear game did.
Yes.
That was one of the scary games for me.
So freaky little girls. I don't know what it is about them, but I
used to have a lot of hair before I played Fear. So what they did was it wasn't about monster out of closet. It was about getting under your skin, and they mess with you in ways at first they would scare you a little bit, and then you would expect things to happen because you just at some point you just get used to stuff, and so it wouldn't happen, and then you're like, okay, so now I'm safe, and that's when they hit you. And they keep doing that all the time. It's a very difficult thing to maintain this kind of pressure on player. But yeah, that's what I would go.
Would you say Dying Light is a scary game?
I would say it has scary moments. The Dying Light is, it's a bit different than DayZ and Alien and Project Zomboid. But definitely we want to create location and quests that get under your skin, that get you scared a little, for sure.
Okay. Dean, I'll jump to you and then back to Al. Presumably, you'd put zombies in it.
No.
Or would you?
No. I guess from my perspective, I just think in that scenario what would be really interesting would be, and what would make it really terrifying would be to try and maintain the Disney sort of wonderful side of it, but then tacitly sort of pull the player into this dark world within themselves. So you might, for example, provide the player a variety of choices, and some of them are quite dark choices that they could make. So you're actually making the player terrified of themselves, of what they're actually going to potentially do in order to save that princess.
And at the end, it could be the mirror on the wall, and they're looking at themselves. And then let's go make the game after.
I think sometimes it's, and this is something I always liked about the Alien series, was you don't have to have it in your face. Sometimes it's something very terrifying about, I guess, the mind is just so amazing that if you just provide suggestions of the terror, sometimes it can actually be far more terrifying than some giant thing that jumps out in front of you. And it's that anticipation of opening a room in Doom,
and your dad jumping out.
Yeah, or like when I was playing Project Zomboid multiplayer at that time, and then I come across this person I held hostage, and then I started making them do terrible things, and yeah, that's right, I was the real monster. So, and I think it's an interesting thing that you can explore as well.
Are the zombies in DayZ scary?
Well, their bugs are pretty scary because they glitch through walls, but maybe one day there will be.
Another thing, just before we come to Al, DayZ creates a great sense of tension and almost like being mugged by other people that you come across, because you're never sure how they're going to react. And it's not, there are zombies in it, but they're not the thing that's scary or unsettling about it. Do you think that you've helped create a new breed of suspense?
I don't think I can take credit for that. I think maybe what DayZ showed was that you can just have like subtle layers of tension coming through, and that can have a mass market appeal, even if there's not lots of blood and not lots of cool effects and things like that, so that people really do appreciate those layered tensions. And some of them are very boring, like figuring out if you have enough food or enough water. It's the same kind of things you approach in Project Zomboid. These aren't exciting or amazing things, but when they're layered together, you present this really heart-pounding moment where a lot of people, they'll try and describe an event they've had in DayZ or Project Zomboid or a lot of other games, and actually what they've done for the last 3 hours is really boring. But because of the tension that they experience through that, it becomes very exciting.
What are have you had any, has anyone told you a story of something they've done in DayZ and you've thought, you monster?
I guess some of the ones that really touched me are, I guess I had a story where the first time I killed a player, I think I recited it before, so I won't recite it again, but I guess one of the ones that really stands out with me was there was this father and son who were playing DayZ, and they only had one compass, and they saw that there was someone around this shed that they wanted to go to loot. So the father sent the son in, and he told him, you come from the east, and I think he'd given him the compass or something like that. And the son's coming in, but it had taken the son a while to get around, to get in the angle. And because of the position of the sun, he didn't have that good a view, and he made a mistake about the angle, and he ended up shooting his son. And his son didn't die, and he goes over to his son, and they've been playing straight for like 4 hours or something. And the father goes over, and the son's like, just carry on without me, because his legs were broken and they didn't have any morphine. And he wrote me this big Facebook post about what it was like, and how, a lot of people, there'd been articles that I'd done, like with some magazines and that, where they talked about DayZ as a murder simulator and all that. But there's sort of an example of this, the fear that you get from the games that we make. They kind of hijack your brain, and so you can have these kind of quite touching moments that come through in them, and I guess that's why people like them.
Yeah. Al, going back to our stimulus, presumably you dress the princess up or as a xenomorph in a bridal.
Yeah, that'd be easy to do. I think actually I'd like to flip it on its head, and you actually get to play the princess.
Okay.
And you're in this merely immersive, really incredible castle, and you have this mad knight who thinks he's on a mission to rescue you, and that could be actually pretty terrifying. But I mean, going back to what these guys are saying, I think the kind of bedrock of kind of these horror experiences is not having the information, not really knowing, the information at hand in order to take that next step, and I think that puts a huge amount of kind of mental pressure on the player, and also I think it's quite exciting, and I think that's what a lot of these games have in common, and it's kind of a information war, and trying to figure out what the next best step is.
It feels like the audience now, they're a bit more sophisticated in their likes of games, so you can take a few more liberties with them as well. You don't have to, you can chuck them in and let them work it out along the way, because you obviously had it's the Alien license, a massive license, and you obviously had to know, Alien versus Predator is not suspenseful because it's an all-out bloodbath at one point, but you've gone the suspenseful route. Was it ever a question in your head of where you'd go?
No, not at all. From the outset, we really wanted to take the player back to Ridley Scott's Haunted House in Space, to actually make you feel like you were there and you were experiencing what it'd be like to confront this monolithic, terrifying, believable, intelligent creature that was, it really was hard to get your head around how it operated and how it moved. And so, day one, we want to try and recapture that experience. Something
all of you have in common, I think, is that all of your games are not necessarily scripted. You have the Alien in Alien Isolation is an AI, so it responds differently all the time. You can't cheat it by learning where its script's going to take it. In Dying Light, it's pretty again, they're AIs, they're freeform. In DayZ, it's other people you're scared of, really. And in Zomboid, the similar sort of thing. Do you think this is the way forward now? Do you think that's where we're going? Do you think people have had enough of scripted things, like scary scripted things?
I mean, from our point of view, I think if we had scripted the Alien, it just wouldn't be scary, because you start to, kind of learn its patterns, and that whole experience would diminish over time. So again, from us, it was really clear that we needed a creature that just used the senses of sight and sound to try and track you down. It's very scary as well. You should go and try it. I swore a lot. So we're going to have a couple of questions in a minute. Just before that, I just want to get your thoughts on virtual reality. Lots of big stuff happening in virtual reality land. Facebook buying Oculus, Sony announcing Project Morpheus. It looks like now this is technology here to stay. I've been playing Monstrum out there. Again, I packed my pants playing it. It's very scary. Will you guys do VR? Do you think it's a good thing for horror games? And anyone can take this.
Well, I guess obviously it's great, and I think anyone who's tried the Rift acknowledges that it's just absolutely fantastic. I think there are issues in terms of, as designers, you do have to think about things a little bit differently in terms of what it actually means, things you have to do, in terms so you don't make the player sick, and there's all these considerations you need to take. We were talking about it the other day, like if you look down and you see that your hands are actually up here, but when you're playing Eve Valkyrie, you look down and your dude is like totally still. Or in fact, you're a girl and you're playing the game, and you look down and you're a guy, and it's all this kind of stuff. It really breaks the immersion for you. So I think there's a whole bunch of factors that were just so much more apparent to me when I played a game with VR that I didn't really think about beforehand. With other games when you're not like that. So, because you're really just taking over the player's view. So I think, it's an evolution, and it's something that has to be taken into consideration.
I would say it's absolutely amazing in how it's incredible how easy it is to trick our brain. And we've run Dying Light on the Oculus Rift, and the first thing I wanted to do was just to climb on top of a building and jump up. And when I jumped, it was like, it's really gets you. You feel it in your guts. So it takes the game to the whole other level.
In Monstrum, you get pursued by an enemy again, and I was running away from it. And when this monster caught me, because I had the rift on, I thought I was going to be attacked. So I flinched, and it does give you that experience. Will, did you have something you wanted to?
Well, I just want to say basically that, you know, as gamers, we're always told what the next big thing is, and you should definitely buy it. And you know, it's like, oh, 3D, it's amazing. Everybody get 3D TV, do this, do that, and all this stuff. And likewise, a lot of motion control stuff. But I think that with the virtual reality thing, it's the first thing I've really genuinely got really excited about. And just, you know, your mind just races with what the places it could take you. I mean, I know that my wife's going to get wound up by it because I'm just going to be sitting around with a mask on all day. But you know.
Okay, we've got time for maybe one or two questions. There's a microphone dead in the middle of the room there. Please, if you have a question, come to the microphone. Don't be shy as well. You can do a silly walk, whatever you like. So if you does anyone have any questions? Here we go. And lean in and fire away.
Hello.
Hi.
My question is pretty much to all of you. Do you feel that equipping players with weapons in horror games takes away from the fear feeling? So like games like Amnesia, where you don't have any weapons and you're actually penalised for looking at an enemy. Compare that to any horror game where you've got a gun, you feel safe all the time. Even if the ammo is scarce in the game, would you mind sort of talking a little bit about that?
So I think it's kind of context sensitive. If you've got a gun but the gun's not actually particularly useful in helping you overcome what you're confronted with, then you're not really empowering the player. So I don't think it's necessarily guns for guns' sake. It's just how what kind of agency do we want to give the player? What kind of actions in the world do we want to give the player? And I guess it's just a balancing act. DayZ has guns, and it's absolutely terrifying. So I don't think it's necessarily what you give the player. It's just where it sits in the experience.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I think as well, so in DayZ, sometimes actually having a gun makes you a target. So I suppose it's those tacit balances that sort of feed off each other. And I think the important thing is, like you say, how does it fit in with the pillar of your game? If the horror is supposed to be, what you're doing, carving your way through thousands and thousands of enemies, then perhaps the gun makes sense and it doesn't really get in the way of that. But with something like Amnesia, the tension is so different. And another good example that I played a lot of a long time ago was like Silent Hill. I thought really built on that very well, and it sort of had that crescendo up and down. You'd be going along, then all of a sudden the world just starts changing around you, and you just start freaking out. And I think there's definitely places for both approaches, and it depends on what mood you're in. You can't just play that Silent Hill or Amnesia type game all the time, otherwise you'd just be a gibbering wreck. So sometimes you just want to go out and have and shoot some terrifying enemies, I guess.
Cool. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? We've got time for one more, probably. Maybe two.
Hello. With the rise of series like Dead Space and the change in direction of Resident Evil, as well as the creation of games like Amnesia, Slender, SCP, people are more and more starting to divide horror games into two other genres, action and survival. Do you think that survival horror games will always be superior in scare factor to action horror games, or can an action horror game done right be just as scary?
Well, I think it depends.
I'd say yes.
Well, I guess it depends, because these type of games are just different. So you can have the action just go for the scary roller coaster, and you can go through it, and it was scary. It was like, yeah, now it's gone. Why with the survival games, you can relive this story again and again and again. You kind of get to create your own stories, and that can get really creepy. So I would just say it's just different.
I think that if you're very clever about it, you can balance it. I think Dead Space 2 is a very good example where I think it was at times it was just amazing survival horror. Other times it was just crazy mental shit, going crazy, carving things up. And so I think, if you're clever about it, then it's okay. But I mean, I will. It's a matter of opinion, and I will always be a lot more of the fan of the creepy, survive kind of aspect of it.
Cool. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, last question then, please.
Hi there.
Hello.
Does the panel believe that fear is ultimately a sense of loss, and how can you mimic that in a game?
Okay. So I think horror is I think there's a sort of sense that horror is about trying to get back to the status quo, that you're trying to not necessarily change the world, but just trying to get back to the norm. So I think horror games are about lack of information, lack of resources, lack of things that you can actually action effectively, and it's that kind of desperate struggle to survive and find things that will change the odds.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think people intrinsically understand loss. I think if you talk to like a two-year-old understands the concept, probably because they've been brutally faced with it, with your cat dying or something. So they start to understand loss, and I think people do. And I read a research paper about soldiers in combat, and when I was reading it, it really reminded me of the situation like Ripley faces in the first Alien. And hopefully no spoiler alerts here because it was made in like '79. But that when she's going back to rescue Newt, a lot of people are like, how could she do that? And that's part of where the tension is. It's like, wow, she's actually going back in there and doing it. What they found was that, let's say a soldier is pinned down over here, and if he stays there, he's going to face certain death. Eventually he's going to die, but it might be a while. But if he gets up and runs, he risks dying in the process. And what they found was that the majority of people without training and without preparation in that just stay where they are. They get petrified with the fear, and even though they know they're going to die staying there, they can't handle the fact of being involved at creating their own demise. And I think it's that coupled with the sense of loss which really just grabs people and petrifies them. And I know when I play games, I haven't played Alien Isolation yet, but that when I do, I'm sure that's kind of that thing I face in my mind where it's like, I don't want to die, so I don't want to do anything. But if I don't do anything, I'm going to die. So.
A cheery note to end on. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. I hope you enjoy the rest of Rezzed. Come tomorrow, come all the time, and come see more talks today. A big thank you to Maciek, to Al, to Will, and Dean. And I'll leave you with a picture, because I liked it. I'll leave you a picture of Suzanne Boyle, everyone. So thank you.